So this video comes to us from Donut Boy, who we've listened to on the channel before. I recently watched their video having to do with how we could improve Myers. And now they're making a video today on how Made for This fundamentally breaks Dead by Daylight. So they're one of those people that like Made for This is ruining the game. So that's cool. That's not something that I subscribe to. I think Made for This is a very, very strong perk, a very, very good perk, but I don't think it's breaking the game. I wouldn't go that far. When I think of breaking the game, I think of like old Dead Hard stuff like that, like old Dead Hard stuff like that. So, yeah, let's go ahead and see what they have to say, but make sure you click that link I just posted in the description of the YouTube down below, or, you know, if you're watching it live right now on the right here in the Twitch chat. So, yeah.
Now in Dead by Daylight, there is a new menace roaming the streets, dominating the meta and is breaking the game itself. This perk I'm sure you are all aware of, that being Made for This. Made for This is a simple perk on paper. Get a speed boost while injured and endurance when you finish healing someone. So why is this perk so game breaking and destroying everything? Dead by Daylight is designed around the core mechanic of the survivors moving around the map and interacting with the game at a base movement speed of 4 meters a second, otherwise known as 100% movement speed, which I will keep referring to it as this. Most killers move between a range of 115 to 110% movement speed, with the exception being the nurse, meaning that these killers move at 4.6 to 4.4 meters a second by default. Now, the whole game is created to play with these numbers in mind, from loops to powers to the size of the maps. However, when you bring in a new mechanic that essentially permanently bumps up the survivor's movement speed to 103%, everything starts getting worse for the killer, and I mean everything.
I mean, it's not permanent.
See, while a 3% movement speed doesn't sound like a lot at all, that is 1/5 of a typical killer's movement speed, which should never happen, as this then further widens the gap between being able to use your power and catch up to survivors. This then makes it about twice as worse for other slower killers who move at 110% movement speed.
I'm gonna say this right away. A well-skilled sprint burst user is better than Made for This every day of the week. A well-skilled Lithe user is better than sprint burst. Are better than Made for This every day of the week. Every day of the week. There are perks that are more potent, that do more to affect the match. I've seen one Unbreakable completely undo an entire game of Killer's Pressure, just because they brought Unbreakable. I've seen Addy, even though it is, I believe Addy to be a pretty fair and balanced perk, is one of the best perks in the game, top 5 in the game. You have a lot of pressure going on, suddenly, you know, end game hits, they get the last gen done, like 2 or 3 people just heal right up. There are tons of perks that are way better than Made for This. Way better than Made for This. I don't think, yeah, let's keep going.
Like Huntress, Deathslinger, etc. There's even early test footage of a map showing off loop sizes, because this is how the game is meant to be played with, and shows off stuff like how quickly a killer can catch up to a survivor, or how their power works in a loop, or in chases, etc. Made for This is a fundamentally overpowered perk in every sense of the word, and there is no way to argue against that fact. While injured,
so there's no way to argue against it. Okay, I'm interested.
You become 3% faster, and for the vast majority of the match, you are typically injured, or against some killers, always injured, like if you're playing against a Legion or Plague, who are great at making sure.
But you're also trading off being injured. You're trade-off being injured to being essentially one-shot the entire match, which is a risk. And depending on what killer you're playing and what powers they have, being able to circumvent chase very well, like most killers in the game have some sort of chase circumvention. Like, that's not always, it's not always clear-cut. It's not always clear-cut.
Lots of survivors are injured all at once. So now, if they would like to use their power, they will actively become worse in chase due to using it. You see how busted that is? See, for some of the more overpowered perks in Dead by Daylight, they usually have an either incredibly hard way to activate it, or an annoying way to use them. Dead hard / off the record, you need to be unhooked to use them, meaning that you get this.
Yeah, but these perks aren't even that meta anymore. Like, they're probably in the top 10, but they're not even that meta anymore. You're not talking about Sprint Burst, Lithe, Unbreakable, Addy, and other perks that I brought up. You're talking about, like, at the edge of the bottom 10. Yeah, Made for This is better than those perks. But you're not even talking about the tip top.
And are in danger when these perks are in effect. Devour Hope and Noed are reliant on Totem, meaning that survivors can shut down your perk entirely before you can even
These aren't meta either.
And then
these aren't meta perks. You see Noed a lot, but that's just because it's commonly available. These aren't meta perks for killer either.
In case of Devour Hope, you need to hook a survivor, then be far enough away to gain a token, and keep gaining tokens until your power actually gets stronger. Pain Resonance / Pop Goes
There
the
you go.
Weasel, you have to hook a survivor, meaning that there are limited uses for these perks and even more so for Pain Resonance. However, the only requirement for Made for this is just to be injured and not exhausted. To say this is incredibly simple is an understatement.
Yeah, because you use this in place of exhaustion perks. It's like same as like, you know, you have no exhaustion perks and then you have sprint burst on, or you don't have any exhaustion perks and you have life on. It's a replacement for it. It's not a, you can't run it with it. It's a replacement for them.
Since again,
Replacement
there are
for perks
many
that are
killers
stronger
who
in
can
that
keep
slot.
people injured for the entirety of the match, or survivors will just not want to heal against the killer, like say Leatherface, since the chainsaw instantly downs them anyways, so healing isn't as important. If we look at other perks or other things that give haste, they all typically have some difficult way to activate them. Like Blood Pact only works if you heal
Blood
or
Pact's
are
bad.
healed by the obsession and then stay very close to them.
You don't want perks
Breakout
like Blood
only
Pact.
works when you're near a carried survivor. Hope only works in the end game, meaning it only lasts a few minutes. And Devour Hope needs you to get tokens before it activates for 10 seconds. Machine Learning makes you go through a whole wall of text to use it, etc., etc.
Machine learning is also a bad perk. Just run Tinker.
My point. Haste is easily one of the most important and probably strongest stat effects in Dead by Daylight due to how much it changes every single loop and interaction in the game. Say you could only loop around a pallet 3 times before they caught up to you, but with Made for this, you could easily squeeze in a 4th or maybe even 5th loop around it. This perk is
If your game, I mean, I said this when Made for this first came out, and this was one of my more disliked videos because I know I have a lot of killer mains. If your games come down to one loop causing you to lose, I have bad news for you. Your game should not be so tight to where you're barely winning because one more loop costs you the game. Your game should not be that close. They really shouldn't. One more loop should not be losing you the game. It really shouldn't. It really shouldn't. I'll just leave it at that.
incredibly
Pretty simple.
easy to use, has no real downside, and gives an incredibly strong stats.
The downside is you have to stay injured. That is the downside. If you want to give it a second downside, you really want to hear me like balance this, quote unquote. Give it like a really, really long timer, like off the record. That's what I would do. If you really have to change this perk and you have to do it, so like people will stop complaining about it, give it a really long timer, like off the record, where it will eventually turn off. But yeah, playing injured the whole time is a risk. I know there are some killers that only function while, you know, keeping people injured, like Plague and Legion, but like that's balancing the whole balancing for the 2 people out of the entire roster.
Effect, an unholy trio. So then, most, if not all, killers in Dead by Daylight have some form of slowdown when they use their power, like say reloading, readying the power, placing down a trap, etc. Meaning that if you do want to use your power in chase, you have to slow down in order to catch them or down them. And if you decide to do this against an injured survivor, well, now you're making it even harder to use your power. Today I was playing some of the 110 killers like Deathslinger and Trickster, and man, it is damn near impossible
Trickster,
to
it's
catch up
bad.
to a survivor like that.
I play Destiny all the time, and I've made for this in almost all my games, and I've barely noticed this perk. I play Destiny all the time. I have made for this in like almost all my games now. Destiny, Trickster, I do notice it. Trickster, I'm like, God, help me. But like Slinger, I'm fine. Slinger, I don't notice it. So I don't know why that is.
A combo of already being slower than other killers, using your power making you slower, and the survivors can now move faster, what is someone realistically supposed to do? This makes it impossible for killers who rely on their power in a loop to actually catch up. Take, for example, someone like Ghostface or Legion, who has no real in-chase power and is basically just an M1 killer. They have no way to catch up to them quickly and have to keep running till they get into chase and can get bloodlust. Or if you're a killer who needs to hold your
Well, Trickster or with Ghostface, what you do is you stalk them and you insta down them. that's how you get around that.
like Nemesis, Wesker, Demogorgon, it becomes easier for them to both dodge your power or just straight up outrun you. See, in Nemesis's case, at level
You're getting outrun at loops with Wesker and Demo? You have a lunge, brother. That is, you could go down an entire length of an entire tile in one go with those characters. You can cover the distance of an entire side of a loop with one lunge with those characters. Hmm.
Level 3, he moved at 100% movement speed so that he could be at 1-to-1 movement speed. When
The argument, the thing was made for this is what I find funny is like, I feel like the argument should be, okay, that's a very, very powerful perk with not enough drawbacks. The drawback was first, you know, it was designed to be, well, you have to play injured the whole time to have it. If that's not enough, we should be thinking about reworking the drawback to it, not the effect. It's not even like a top 5 perk in the game. It might be 5. It might be the 5th. Maybe. But like it's not a top 5 perk in the game. We should be talking about the trade-off and like worrying about like, well, what would be a good trade-off for that effect? But like people that are out here just like just frothing at the mouth that it's like the effect itself is breaking apart the entire game. Like it doesn't like when you say stuff like that, like with all due respect to the content creator, when you say like, oh well, I can't catch a mate for this user as Wesker or Demo, who literally have lunge powers that can scale an entire loop in like 1 second, like I can't take you seriously. There's something you're doing wrong there. Like, yeah.
His power against the survivor, which is a very nice buff. But now you would be losing ground due to the survivor literally just being injured, aka the thing you want. I genuinely could see exposed or instant down killers starting to be more relevant due to this issue, since if they're fully healed, it is easier to deal with them, which makes no sense at all. Typically, an injured survivor is supposed to be the easy one to deal with since you only have to hit them once. But now, with perks like Made for This and Resilience, they are better than a healthy survivor.
That's a playstyle, brother. Now you're gonna start attacking Resilience? Now you're gonna start attacking Resilience. You're like, Resilience needs to go. The killer survivor should just be useless while they're injured, okay? Like, man, I just, you know, we should just, you know, everybody should just be an insta-down killer, you know? Like, like, uh-oh. It's like that, what's that one meme? It's like a webcomic. He's like, let's see what's under that mask. And they're like, oh, nope, let's put that mask back on. It's like that meme. It's like, this started out as like is Made for This too strong argument. I'm like, well, maybe it is. And maybe we can rework like the trade-off for the effect. And I was like, I have that conversation with you. But now you're like, oh, actually Resilience has always been a problem. Like, okay, let's put that back on. Your other feelings are coming through and kind of like your biases are showing. Is Made for This overpowered? Let's see, what's Conch say?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, there you go. I feel like the Conch really does have a mind of its own sometimes. It's kind of scary.
This perk not only makes it much harder for killers to use their power, but makes it nigh impossible for M1 killers to ever catch up to them on a good map. Like, there's nothing a Myers or Doctor can do to deal with this. Since they don't have any form of dash or teleport or anything like that, all the Made for This user...
Didn't you just tell me that, like, one of the ways to circumvent this was through insta-down killers? You just said Myers has nothing to do against it, who is an insta-down killer?
has to do is hold W, and they are just 10 times better than a typical survivor. The only thing that the killer can do is hold W and press M1, which means they have no real option. The only real quote-unquote downside or counter to this perk is the fact that survivors cannot be exhausted for this perk to be in effect, sort of like a pseudo-exhaustion perk. Yes. However, you need to apply exhaustion to them, since this perk doesn't apply exhaustion to the user, unlike how perks like Sprint Burst or Lithe make you exhausted. So it has an indefinite amount of uptime, unlike most perks. So exhaust is a fairly common status effect, since most killers have some form of add-on that applies it. However, if you're playing a killer who doesn't have that, like say Oni, you'd then have to rely on perks like Blood Echo or Fearmonger.
But Oni literally charges at them at the speed of... What? Oni literally has Blood Fury where he just like charges like super quick and he has speed add-ons. How are you letting Made for This users clown on you while playing Oni? How are you letting Made for This users clown on you if you're playing a character where his main power is the fact that he moves as fast as a f***ing freight train? Help me.
However, there is still an issue with it. The problem being that exhaust is still a fairly easy status effect to get rid of, just by hiding, doing objectives, or just walking around. Then Blood Echo won't work on a survivor who is fully healed, so it won't even work on them. And then Fearmonger only lasts for 5 seconds. Fearmonger is a great perk at countering exhaustion perk, since it pauses the exhaust timer so it messes up things like Lithe and Sprint Burst. But since Made for This doesn't apply exhaust, this doesn't really do much, since 5 seconds in a loop is fairly easy to manage through pallets or vaults. And that's still not even the strongest thing about Made for This. There's the fact that it stacks with other speed boosts, the most obvious and common one being
Oh
Hope.
my god! If you are constantly hitting the end game in all of your matches, you f***ing suck at the goddamn game. Is that what you wanted to f***ing hear? If you are constantly hitting the end game, you f***ing suck at killer. You're bad. There, I f***ing said it. God, I'm tired of hearing this. The same people who bitched about Addy for nonstop for so f***ing long. It's like if you are constantly hitting the end game, you as a killer in Dead by Daylight should have somebody dead at 2 gens. But if you don't, you need to make that happen as soon as possible. You are not doing that if you people are constantly hitting the end game. You're playing poorly, which is fine if you don't care about winning. But if you care about winning, you start asking for balance changes because you're not winning. You f***ing suck. You should not be like, this is a dead perk slot. This is a dead perk slot. If they never make it endgame. If they don't make it endgame, that's a dead perk slot. That does nothing. I'm gonna do a little experiment right now. I'm gonna pull up a Night of Killer that I played. I don't want to see how many times I actually hit the endgame. First match Blight. So first match Blight. Don't make it to endgame. Second match Wesker. Don't make it to endgame. Third match also Wesker. Do I make it to endgame? No, they don't make it to endgame. Fourth match Legion? Legion is what that is? Is that a Legion match? Yeah, fourth match Legion. Don't make it to endgame. Fifth match Oni. Don't make it to endgame. Sixth match Huntress. Don't make it to endgame. Seventh match also Huntress. Let's see, how did that one end? Didn't make it to endgame. The first match that makes it to endgame is, well, no, that didn't make it to endgame technically. So an 8-match Pyramid Head, it makes it to endgame technically because everybody DCs and hatch starts. So 9th match is Spirit. And these are me using my chill builds. I am running no more than 2 slowdown on all of these. I want to point that out. 9th match Spirit doesn't make it to endgame. 10th match Deathslinger doesn't make it to endgame. We don't have to sit here and do this. I have 10 straight matches, no endgame. Games are ending at 3 to 1 gens. Sometimes even more, sometimes even 4. That's what your game should look like if you want consistent results. How are you making it to endgame so often that like you're seeing hope all the time? How are you getting to endgame all the time? You need to clean up your gameplay and put more pressure.
And man, I remember when nobody used hope, but now it genuinely might be a bit too strong. I remember I made a video talking about how close it would be to start moving as fast, if not faster than the killer in a normal match, and here we are. And if you compare it with Refined Serum and Hope, you would get a 14% speed boost. That's why I'm afraid of this perk, because even buffing it to 3 or 4%...
Well, this was dumb too, because Dark Theory didn't matter either. Everybody thought this perk was going to be the new boogeyman, and that perk, nobody ever runs it anymore, because it's not good.
Means that you can now move faster than the killer. A free 10% speed boost is objectively too much and makes half the roster genuinely just unwinnable last. There is nothing you can do as some killers if someone is running Made for This Hope. The amount of people I've seen use Made for This Hope Resilience is astounding, and it is so incredibly unfun to play against as it takes ages to both get into a chase and then actually be able to use your power and down them. And again, yes, while Hope is limited to the endgame, meaning that it's only in effect for about 3-4 minutes tops, it still is 7%
Yeah,
movement.
and you shouldn't be I just showed you 10 straight matches of Dead by Daylight where I never even touched the end game. Closest got was 1 gen. So why are you hitting endgame all the time to be seeing hope?
Argument is just, oh, it only activates in the end game, so it's not that strong. Look at Adrenaline. Adrenaline is easily one of the best perks in the entire game.
Yeah, it is.
Now imagine if you get a
But it's
movement
earned.
speed buff that is basically half, if not more, than the killer's movement speed, paired with an infinitely lasting speed boost that lasts throughout the whole trial. You can see why this perk is genuinely breaking the game. So, to summarize, a free infinite speed boost that hard counters 80%
More annoying than
of
broken?
killer's
I agree.
aim with no
I
real
agree, Gigas.
easy way to shut it down.
It's annoying, not
So,
broken.
how would I fix
It's very
it?
annoying, but not
Pretty
broken.
simple. My first idea is make it work like Lucky Break. It, for some reason, has a free endurance effect while healing, so why not make it so that while you are injured, you get 60 seconds of a speed boost that can be replenished by healing, just like how Lucky Break's effect can be replenished through healing. My second idea is make it only apply for a bit after becoming injured, then they become exhausted. Sort of like a reverse Overcharge.
I wouldn't make it choice lanes,
where
I'd make it
instead of
longer.
getting a quick,
Yeah.
big speed boost, you get a smaller, longer lasting speed boost. My final idea would be
Well,
that
that's the point. That's why it made for this exists as a perk concept. Is instead of running a strong exhaustion perk, a stronger exhaustion perk, like Lithe and Sprint Burst, which you have to like actually play with, you have something that's not as potent, but you can use, you know, longer. Well, currently it's indefinitely, but adding a cooldown of like a minute or 2 would be fine.
you get this speed boost after healing a survivor and you're injured, so it's harder to activate while getting a good status. I thought of this idea because there are many times in Dead by Daylight where you finish healing the other survivor and the killer starts coming. However, you didn't have enough time to get healed by the other survivor, so now you can at least run away with a slightly larger speed.
Well, nobody's gonna run it.
Personally, I
Could be
would say
another
this
nobody
meta
cares
is far
perk.
worse than the Call of Overcharge meta, due to the fact that
What? Made for this is worse than Colorblind Overcharge. Well, that includes Eruption, right? Like the 25 seconds of in cap? Like we're including that in there, the Overbrian Eruption meta? Made for this is on the same Do you remember when they had to literally go in and change the length that matches could go in Dead by Daylight because of that meta? They literally changed the end game timer of how long matches could go because people were holding matches for hostage for that f***ing long to win. Remember when they had to go do that? That's how bad that meta was. Because I do. But yeah, Made for this is on the same f***ing level. Sure, bud. Sure. Sure. Wow. Wow.
that killers genuinely cannot play the game or use their powers. While yes, that meta was incredibly boring and unfun for the survivors, this current one is just straight up not balanced for killers at all and makes half the roster not playable if you're not a fast killer like Blight, Spirit, Wesker, etc. Because if you're a fast killer
how do I playing almost every killer on the roster, right? God, my life was ruined when that perk came out, I guess. I don't know. I just, I was just kind of repeating something I've said before. Is like, Made for this has been out for a while. My win rate has not really changed. So, I guess I'm just an exception to this rule somehow. Smile.
Nurse, it doesn't really matter how fast the survivors are moving because you can just instantly run up and hit them. All this perk does is further widen the strength gap between the
My friend, say Sarah
115
Bear.
and
How's it
110
going?
killers, where the weak killers are punished by this perk and the strong killers aren't really affected. Because if you're moving 3% faster against a Blight, who cares? It's the Blight, the fastest killer in the game. Honestly, try playing as an M1 killer like Ghostface or Myers for a bit and see how
I
well
do
it goes.
all the
'Cause
time.
I feel like this perk has a 50
It
to
looks nice, thank you.
60% pick rate,
Appreciate it.
so
I did it
you'll
myself.
100% run into it within 2 matches. I don't see how behavior would allow this perk to get even past phase 1 of testing with how busted it is. I mean, if you think about this perk for even 5 seconds, you can see how OP it is just by itself. A 3% infinite movement speed boost while you're injured, and half the game you're injured. Then you can still combine it with things like Hope and the Serum, so you start moving faster than the
I'm
killer
amazing.
can.
Plus, since you've been here.
Really?
I appreciate you
I would
having
say
you
I
in the
hope this
community,
gets
friend.
nerfed next patch, but
I
the
like having you
PTB
around.
notes are out and the PTB is out, and yeah. Well, with that being said and done, take care of yourselves and have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.
This all sounds okay. I'm gonna try to be as kind as I can and respectful as I can. I was kind of mean in the middle of what I was saying in the middle of this video, so I'll try to phrase it in a nicer way. Made for this is definitely a very, very strong perk. I don't think it's top 5. If we want to do something to it, I think it needs like a off the record kind of deal where like it goes on for a minute or two and then it stops. That's what we can do. To assume that the effect of 3% speed is breaking the entire game and it makes the game unplayable, when that has not at all been my experience and that has not all been other people's experience, this just sounds like a whole lot of like, my game, the way I performed as killer was so bad that one extra loop around loops costs me my games because I wasn't good yet. Like, that's what that sounds like to me. If one extra loop around these loops is costing you your games, brother, what is happening? It's like the hope made for this conversation. Like, I just showed you that out of 10 matches, none of them hit endgame. 10 matches. By the way, it's like, it probably takes like 4 matches of Dead by Daylight and like, let's see, about 4 or 5, maybe 6 matches if you're being super quick of like 1 hour Dead by Daylight, like 4 or 5 matches of Dead by Daylight. So I played what, 2-ish hours of Dead by Daylight, never ever hit endgame. Never ever hit endgame. Why are you hitting endgame so often? It starts making me ask questions. And I think this is just one of those things, and I'm gonna try not to get on this tangent, because like, this is one of the things that like, as somebody who plays and really, really enjoys Killer, that's where most of my hours are in this game. The Killer main community is accessible, and I hate them for the most part, because they go off and they watch streamers who will take a loop so wide that you can fit a Ford F-150 in the middle of their looping, and then they'll be like, oh my god, Made for this is so OP, when they're playing like shit. And they blame it on the damn perks because they don't want to admit in front of their 1,000 viewer audience that they're bad at the game because they want to keep their viewer count up. So they blame it on perks because they don't want to improve or admit their goddamn mistakes because they're idiots. That's the Killer main meta when it comes to streaming and content creation. Is make mistakes, blame it on perks. That way everybody has this, oh, woe is me, survivors are so oppressive. Like, you know, entitlement attitude. Instead of asking, what can I do to improve? What could I have done better there? Maybe it was just the map. Like things like that. Things that are constructive. But no, they want to be like, oh, nerf the perk, it's making me horrible. Like, brother, the entitlement of these people made me not want to be in those communities anymore, because I was so happy to be out of Old Dead Hard Zone. Like, Old Dead Hard was one of the worst things to ever exist. It made me so miserable for so many years, and we have never had anything like that since, and we'll probably never have anything of that level of caliber and strength ever again, and it makes me so happy. That's why I'm chill on Killer almost every day I play Killer, because I'm chill, because I'm not dealing with stuff like Old Dead Hard anymore, which was obnoxious and terrible. Some people, it wasn't about the fact that it was Old Dead Hard and the fact that Old Dead Hard was actually too stupid. It was about, that was their big excuse for why they're terrible at the f***ing game. And that's what it was about, and that's what it continues to be about as they go into, and I'm not saying this creator's doing it, I'm just saying that like it's a mentality I see in the community that me off. But yeah, it's like, for some people, what I was saying is for some people, they realized how strong Old Dead Hard was and saw it was unhealthy in the game and wanted it out of the game. And that's great. But some people always just have a chip on their shoulder and they always needed a boogeyman to blame their problems on in the game. And those people are still here and still telling their Killer main audiences that like remember when we were all rallying to, like, people were all rallying to get Windows nerfed. Windows of Opportunity. They're like, that perk needs to go. That perk's too powerful, because like there were in a vacuum of no OP perks, people got bored. People didn't know what to blame them losing on. So they're just like, Windows of Opportunity. That's the one that's gotta go. The perk that adds nothing, does nothing besides lets you know where dead zones are. But I'm not saying it's not a good perk. It's nice, to, especially when you're in like solo queue and you don't have comms, to know where somebody's thrown a bunch of pallets already. It's very nice. But like, the loops play the same. They're not sprint bursting or lithing, the loops play the same. But people were like, that's the new boogeyman. Go get him, officer. Because, like, in a vacuum where there was no OP perks, they just got bored. They didn't know what else to blame their losses on. So they're like, Windows. Yes. Windows of opportunity. That is the problem. You know what you could also use window of opportunity? You could use your eyes. You guys ever notice that, like, I take off windows of opportunity sometimes and I can still play the game? You know why? Because I use my eyeballs. It's very cool. It's very neat. It's very awesome. Wonderful. Very cool. But some people, I feel like, just always need a boogeyman. They need something to blame their loss on because they're just too prideful and too selfish to admit that, hey, maybe there's things I need to improve on. And even though I'm really, really good at the game, I have all the thousands of hours. Maybe I'm still bad in certain areas. Maybe I'm slipping in certain areas. No, I'm just going to blame it on this perk. That way my chat doesn't think I'm bad. So, like, you know, I can keep my following. Just stuff like that. Stuff makes me angry. I'm lucky enough that I have the wisdom now to call out this stuff. Like, I can see that like a mile away and be like, okay, well, that's happening. But, like, it's still frustrating to see. Still frustrating to see. So, yeah. Taylor, I don't think made for this as bad as people make it out to be. If you really want to change it, give it a long cooldown. Like a minute or something. Minute, 2. Who cares? Like, what's 80 seconds, 90 seconds for off record? Do something like that. Do something like that. But, like, this whole, like, it's breaking the game and I'm losing every single game of Dead by Daylight because of made for this. Like, that's not happening. You're not losing every single game of Dead by Daylight because I'm made for this. Not happening. It's not real. Shut up. There.